I think a lot of people think it's just going to be great. If we just make these things, they're just going to be great and we're fine. And a lot of people think this is definitely a dystopia and we're definitely fucked. And I think it can truly be a third thing.
Welcome to Crash Course, a podcast about business, political, and social disruption, and what we can learn from it. I'm Tim O'Brien. Today's Crash Course: artificial intelligence versus the music industry. The voice you heard at the open was producer and songwriter extraordinaire Grimes, speaking to us about the good, the bad, and the in-between of artificial intelligence and music. The AI hype may be starting to die down overall, but AI isn't going away. You can literally hear it in music. Back in April, a super convincing AI duet between rapper Drake and singer The Weeknd went viral, causing panic in the music industry. And it opened the floodgates for deep fakes like Frank Sinatra singing hip-hop and a fictional Oasis mixtape called AISIS. It's not just novelty memes either. AI-generated background music is sneaking into your Spotify playlist, cranking out chill soundscapes, and helping the Beatles put out one last song called Now and Then. So music is again on the cusp of huge tech-driven change, 20 years after file-sharing misfit Napster made CD collections obsolete. To help us delve into what that change might look like, we at Bloomberg Opinion sent one of our columnist detectives, Lionel Laurent, out to investigate. Lionel is a writer who wears many hats, one of which involves keeping an eye on digital innovation and upheaval in the music industry. And he has a tale to tell. Hi, Lionel.
Hi, Tim.
I'll let our listeners know that you've been working on this from Paris. So, before we get started, why music?
Well, music is a personal passion of mine, and music is part of what makes us human. So, seeing AI take on more of that is, I think, a big cultural moment. But music as an industry has also served as a kind of canary in the coal mine for wider tech disruption, including streaming. It really holds a mirror up to the rest of the economy. So I think it's important for everyone to follow this.
Well, I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us what you've learned, and I'll catch up with you later in the show.
Thanks, Tim. Now, I'm willing to bet that you probably haven't heard of French songwriter Benoît Carré. He's got a special claim to music fame. He's behind the first ever song composed by artificial intelligence. It's called Daddy's Car, and it was released in 2016. This isn't 100% AI. Benoît wrote the lyrics and arranged the song, and that's him singing. But the rest was composed by an AI model trained entirely on songs by the Beatles. Using all those Fab Four classics, the machine came up with its own suggestions and ideas. It's like if John, Paul, George, and Ringo had a fifth robotic friend jamming away, and Benoît playing with the results.
I play with the tool. I fed it with 50 songs of the Beatles, my favorite songs of the Beatles. And then I got a result, 8 bars, and then it was funny, and I continued.
So I think we can agree this AI music isn't quite at the level of Let It Be. Still, Daddy's Car was a kind of milestone. And for Benoît, it is like improvising or writing a regular song hunched over a piano. He's been using tech to make music since the days of the Commodore 64. Kids, ask your parents what that is. Today he does it all from his studio in Paris, a music geek's paradise stuffed with guitars, reel-to-reel tape, and computers. It all helps inspire new ideas, which he puts out under the name Skygge. That's Danish for shadow, inspired by a Hans Christian Andersen tale about a shadow that's alive.
AI helps me to explore unexpected part of my creativity. It's like the shadow in the tale of Andersen, who is becoming something independent from the main character.
This summer, Benoit gave me a magical mystery tour of how AI could revolutionize music and why it shouldn't be banned or dismissed out of hand. First stop, deepfakes, like Heart on My Sleeve, that Drake Weeknd duet we mentioned earlier. Benoit doesn't think the imitation game is all that interesting musically or fair ethically, but he says it shows how AI has improved from the days of Daddy's Car to do some things incredibly well, like fooling the world into thinking a timbre transfer or vocal transfer is genuine. Here's Benoit whipping up a similar kind of song in the style of Eminem.
I asked ChatGPT to write a song in the style of Eminem. I took this result from ChatGPT and I sung it, and it created this result with Eminem's timbre. You will hear that there is a French accent. The weight of the world is crushing me down.
Trying to keep my head up, but I'm feeling drowned. Me doubts and fears that always lurking, and my fragile soul is constantly hurting.
Wow, that is pretty convincing. Though I should mention we're not yet at the level of being able to hit a button and get instant deepfake back. This took several steps: a voice clone, an AI backing track, lyrics by ChatGPT, and Benoit's vocal cords. Like the so-called Mechanical Turk, a fake chess-playing robot that was all the rage in the 1700s, there is a human hidden in there.
I got in 2 hours something that is from nothing with the voice of Eminem.
Deepfakes are just the tip of the AI iceberg, though. Benoit also showed us hybridization, a way to mix his voice with that of another singer's, in this case the late Chet Baker, and create a kind of weird new voice in between.
Je suis vieux, j'adore la pleine lune, j'adore la solitude.
The next step will be performers able to use these kinds of augmented voices on stage, manipulating not just the tone of a singer's voice, but its feel, its groove, and eventually also have a machine able to do more, maybe all, of the composing process. I asked Benoit what it's like as a human dealing with the machine.
The risk is to lose yourself and get bored by all the results that you get, because AI is never tied. You can always generate. And I must say that oftenly the results are not so good. Most of the results are like average. It takes time to get the result that you were expected, or the result that will inspire you to finish the song.
What's your vision of the future then? At which point do you become obsolete or unnecessary?
If I can imagine a tool that will make and generate what you describe, more like Midjourney for the image, for example, or Wall-E, I think, or DALL-E, I think it will be great, and maybe it will replace some musician, or it will be game changer.
The ability to type in a text prompt and get a full song back sounds wild, and also pretty dangerous when you consider those replaced musicians. But let's face it, a sense of danger is not going to slow down this tech race, and the finish line may be closer than we think. Ed Newton-Rex is a composer turned AI aficionado. He says this year will be a major milestone towards 100% computer-written songs, though for him the real value of AI will be in collaborating with and inspiring humans. He points to his own work, I Stand in the Library, which you can hear in the background, as an example of that. He wrote the music, but he got AI to write the lyrics.
This isn't just about kind of creating a 3-minute song, having AI do that. Once you have an artificial entity that's essentially musical, there is so much you can do. You can ask it for ideas, you can ask it for inspiration, you can have interplay with it, you can get it to fill in extra parts in the music you're making. You can kind of do anything with it that you could do with a human musician working with you. And I think that's where it gets really exciting.
All this enthusiasm for AI has kind of surprised me. Clearly, Benoit and Ed show that there's real human creativity going into AI music. I came into this expecting to find tone-deaf tech bros, not real musicians. But I'm also feeling uneasy about it. Even setting aside the messy ethics raised by AI that's trained on other artists' work, I'm starting to get nagging flashbacks of the Disney cartoon Fantasia I saw as a kid. Remember The Sorcerer's Apprentice, when Mickey Mouse starts getting addicted to his productive, time-saving tool, creating an army of broomsticks to do his chores? Chaos ensues as control is lost. And imagining an uncontrolled release of AI models and voice clones does not inspire confidence. I asked Benoit what the dangers of this might be.
I think that Eminem remembers all the songs that he has done, so he will easily say, no, it's not me. So I don't think that this kind of demo, this kind of process is really dangerous, but hybridization, as I showed, begins to be dangerous because you can't control. It's hard to control. If I didn't say to you like I did it with Chet Baker, you wouldn't have recognized Chet Baker. So that becomes a bit dangerous here. And it's dangerous also because you can do it very easily.
We have to wonder about unintended consequences like misinformation, misuse, and bias too. Last year, a fictional computer-generated rapper called FN Mika, complete with green hair, a nose ring, and teeth grills, sparked an online backlash after his lyrics used racial slurs and trivialized police brutality. Will the toxic content we've seen from AI chatbots like ChatGPT be any more acceptable if it's set to music? This is fundamentally about humanity versus technology, says musicians' rights advocate Crispin Hunt, once a member of 90s British pop band The Long Pigs.
Paul McCartney singing The Beach Boys is really amusing, or Drake and The Weeknd doing a duet on somebody else is really amusing. I would be totally freaked out if somebody took my voice. And I think we as humans need to get in front of that very quickly before the concrete's set, before it's set in, and before mistakes get made, or we just give in to this idea that, it's progress, you can't stop progress. But there's a great line by a Polish dissident poet called Stanislaw Lech, which said, "Is it progress if a cannibal eats with a fork?"
Ouch. So maybe there is a thin line between the well-meaning digital composers and the evil fork-wielding cannibals. The next big question is, what is the music industry doing about it? Well, the first response from the record labels has been straight out of the Napster playbook. Fight, fight, fight. But this isn't the year 2000 anymore. They're good at it now. When the MP3 landed, record companies were like a grandparent trying to understand how to work their new smartphone. Today, they've rebuilt themselves around a small number of streaming platforms like Spotify. It's a lot easier to make digital pirates walk the plank. And there's been a lot of plank walking. Hearts on My Sleeve was quickly taken down from social media. Unauthorized voice cloning apps are being shut down. The Grammys have banned fully AI-generated music, and Spotify is cracking down on bot activity on its platform. Here's Jeffrey Harlston, General Counsel for Universal Music Group, whose artists include Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran, testifying before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee in July.
AI in the service of artists and creativity can be a very, very good thing. But AI that uses, or worse yet, appropriates the work of these artists and creators and their creative expression, their name, their image, their likeness, their voice, without authorization, without consent, simply is not a good thing.
And the music industry has also learned other lessons since the Napster days. It knows if people really want to use something, death by lawsuit is not going to work. And not all AI music is deepfaked. Users of AI website Boomy have created over 17 million weird-sounding electronic tracks, for example. I have trouble getting through just one of them, but still, maybe one day there'll be a hit in there and not one that can be shut down by a lawyer. So, here's the next twist. Record labels are done just playing defense. They now want to go on the offensive by making some AI music of their own that plays by their rules.
Wait, hold it right there, Lionel. This is shaping up to be quite the story, but we need to take a quick break, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds good to me.
We're back with Lionel Laurent talking about AI and music. So, Lionel, let's hear more about how record labels are fighting back by co-opting AI.
Sure. It's a story that begins with a young entrepreneur based in Berlin called Oleg Stavitsky. The AI startup he co-founded, Endel, made the music that you're listening to now. And Endel has just signed a landmark partnership with Universal Music Group, that really anti-deepfake label we heard from earlier, to make AI music using their huge catalogue of stars. And this all started with Oleg looking for music that would help him concentrate, similar to the work of ambient music pioneer Brian Eno.
Every time I'm trying to concentrate, I listen to Brian Eno, and I noticed that a lot of his music and a lot of ambient music in general started kind of popping up on all of these functional music playlists, and projects like Music for Programming appeared.
That got Oleg thinking, what if every time you hit play, the soundscape was different and fit your mood by monitoring data, such as your real-time heart rate or the time of day? That would be like having your own personal Brian Eno made by a machine.
I kind of turned to my co-founders and I was like, well, I guess we're going to have to build an AI.
This AI would be trained on a very specific set of musical building blocks, or stems. Stems can be thought of as the separate instruments or components that make up a song. Think of an individual drum beat, a keyboard line, a vocal melody.
I've been to the top of Mount Everest. I've sailed the 7 seas. I've shared the stage with all the best.
As 3 separate stems. Endel's AI will then uniquely reassemble the stems into a new soundscape every time. Personally, it's not for me, but clearly there is a market for functional music. It represents an estimated 7 to 10% of the entire streaming market. Endel's next smart move was to blend that robotic AI with well-known human artists like James Blake and Grimes. They submitted the stems, and Endel did the rest. And basing this all on stems, rather than existing albums or songs, means Endel gets official recognition as co-composer of the real-time soundscape. That's how Oleg says he avoided a fight with the music industry.
With us, it was always, the reaction was always a mix of true, kind of genuine interest and almost excitement, and people were intrigued because we never removed the artist from this process. We never said, we just get the stamps from James Blake, but then we're going to produce like a million records and James is not going to be mentioned anymore.
But the bigger Endel got, the more competition became unavoidable, because money that would normally be going to the record labels is being diverted to tech startups making ambient music. The economics of streaming today are all about market share. Listen to a track on Spotify for more than 30 seconds, and it counts as a play, whether it's 40 seconds of experimental electronic music, a 3-minute pop hit, or 5 minutes of whale song. The more people click on ambient music rather than, say, Drake, the more it'll impact the bottom line. According to Goldman Sachs, the 3 major labels' market share has dropped from around 85% to 71% between 2017 and 2022, which is why, when the announcement of that landmark Universal Endel deal for more record label-approved AI music landed in May, it looked a lot like, can't beat 'em? Join 'em.
They cannot just keep ordering takedowns. That is a road to nowhere. They need to have kind of a offensive strategy, and they need to embrace this in some way and form. And it's just turned out to be that Endel was kind of the only company that spent years kind of learning to speak the language and dance the dance of these labels.
So, what does a record label-backed ambient AI do next? Oleg's dream is to make new AI versions of artists' existing catalogues. So, for example, Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift might one day offer Endel versions of their albums designed for sleep, work, or exercise. And imagine if in the future, instead of Taylor's version, we get happy, sad, or heavy metal versions of her albums.
Essentially expands the universe of the artist, and it's just such a beautiful concept, of creating a functional soundscape version of your favorite artist's music.
It's not just Endel. Other labels are sensing an opportunity. Warner Music CEO recently praised an AI-enabled duet between Costa Rican musician Pedro Capmany and the generated voice of his late father. I asked Denis Ladiguerie, head of music group Believe, which owns a DIY music platform called TuneCore, about this change of heart, some might say doublethink, in the industry.
Whether it's for Believe or generally for the music industry, AI is an opportunity and not a threat. Why do people think AI is a threat? Generally because they do think that the deployment of AI will not be controlled. And I have the opposite view around this, which is that AI deployment will be heavily controlled, and everyone is approaching AI with a very strong sense of responsibility.
That control means labels can set their own rules of engagement with AI. Denis gives 4 examples of rules that Believe is currently applying on AI music uploaded to its platform: consent from the artist, control over the output, compensation, and transparency.
That's how we're approaching the landscape today. And so we are not going to distribute tracks that are 100% created by AI unless they meet some of these criteria.
Believe operates mainly in the mid-market of artists rather than the superstars. And the hope is that industry-friendly AI can dig up the next generation's bright young things by making it easier to unlock tunes sitting inside their heads. Again, all while following the rules.
We think the number of artists that gets educated through technology to become better musicians is going to increase, and more people creating better music will find an audience. This is going to help frontline artists elevate and create better music.
This optimism around control is also why YouTube has created a new set of rules for what it calls responsible AI music. But this all seems to be moving very fast. There's a lot of pressure on labels to be a first mover and sign deals with tech companies. Are we sure that artists' consent and all that precious data from their life's work isn't being handed over a little too quickly? And what if the focus on control starts to stifle creativity if it trips up artists who are using AI, but fairly, without breaching copyright? Remember Ed Newton-Rex, who we heard from earlier in the show? In 2015, he rapped about this exact thing when promoting his startup JukeDeck, citing the copyright constraints faced by YouTubers looking for good background music.
Imagine there's a video that you're creating, it's been weeks in the making, and you've painstakingly taken it frame by frame and got the whole take looking really super great. It's hard to find the right music. If you've got a song you like, you're not allowed to use it. Copyright means if you choose it for your video, YouTube will just remove it. But this right stuff, that's all unique. It will do it in any style you see.
Come back, fake Drake, all is forgiven. And going back to The Sorcerer's Apprentice, what if record label robots become so effective at expanding their catalogue of stars that it makes it harder for the new generation of artists to cut through the noise? When does a revolution become stagnation? It's time to ask if there's an alternative to either the dystopia of no control or the utopia of total control. Something like a third way that's maybe a little more punk rock, putting more power into the hands of the artist. And the best person to ask is Grimes, who we heard from at the beginning of the show. She is one famous artist who is actually embracing AI experimentation while also still trying to set limits, sort of like rapper Chuck D, who during the Napster era said downloadable music was a model to embrace. I asked Grimes first off if she generally felt excited or worried about the current state of AI in music?
I think I would say I'm quite both. One of the main things I'm doing right now is trying to figure out the ways to make this safe for humans, not even just existentially, but like socially and emotionally and civilizationally. But I also think that's totally possible.
One of her biggest experiments is a new project allowing deepfakes, or songs that clone her voice, which she announced when Heart on My Sleeve went viral. She tweeted in April, "Feel free to use my voice without penalty. I have no label and no legal bindings." I guess it's not surprising Grimes is into AI. Her dark electronic music already embodies a kind of tech-human coexistence. She cultivates an extremely online sci-fi anime persona, live streams video games, and has sold digital art as NFTs. When I asked her how she sees AI being used in music, she compares it to autotune, that instantly recognizable tool allowing anyone to hit those high notes.
I am really pro democratizing the process. I have a pretty interesting recognizable timbre to my voice, and I have a weird speech, like I have a lisp, and like I just am not that in tune, and I don't really care about being in tune. I'm like a producer. Autotune is a good sort of like metaphor because I think we got, especially in the last decade, a lot more interesting and unique top line than we'd gotten previous to that, because you had all these kind of brains that are not singer brains, like singing really well. And I think you especially get magic a lot of the time when you have someone who doesn't have the fundamental or wasn't super trained in something and they just try it for the first time.
So the more AI can support creators by lowering the barriers to entry for composition and production, the better. That melody you just wrote on an acoustic guitar could quickly sound like a full band in the studio without actually needing the band or the studio.
I personally know a lot of artists who have really struggled. The process of finding people who are good and then paying them can be really hard. And especially with the complexity of music publishing, that can be really hard. So if you can just sing a song and then get like a bunch of different generations of instrumentals behind it, I think for singers specifically and songwriters, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Grimes' inspiration for her own initial experiments with AI came from the idea of training a model on her own work, bottling her entire style into a product, not just one particular sample, effect, or tone. She imagined a database of all sorts of different music producers, from Timbaland to underground talent like the late producer Sophie, getting a reliable income from selling this type of data. And then came the hype and the panic around Heart on My Sleeve, which served as a kind of wake-up call to get the debate around AI going.
I think it's good for people to push the limits with what's legal, so everyone sees what the technology can do. I tried to make my voice a bunch of times, but the technology just hadn't been there.
Grimes partnered with CreateSafe to launch software called ElfTech, which uses AI to replicate her voice. The way it works is this. Music creators can upload audio or record directly into the app, then receive a file with the same audio, but with Grimes' voice instead of their own. If the song gets an official release, the royalties are split 50-50. Grimes' manager, Leonard Dauda, told me when we spoke that 50,000 people are using the product, and they've had over 100,000 audio generations, uploading their audio or playing with the tool. Of the more than 100 Grimes AI songs that have been put on streaming platforms, one has over 600,000 plays, he says. And if you're wondering what Grimes' clone actually sounds like, here's a track by Benoit Carré, yes, Mr. Daddy's Car himself, called Océan Noir, in which Grimes AI replaces his vocals sung in French.
Océan Noir. J'entends les baleines dans un acouphène. Ici aucune vague n'accoste. Aucun souffle n'étoffe.
Compared to how collaborations are normally done, this is way less paperwork, way less hassle, and way more streamlined than usual. Now, there isn't just one Grimes, but potentially infinite Grimes, which in an always online 24/7 world of social media and music streaming is a huge advantage. This takes fan engagement into a new era. Grimes also reckons the music being created in a more AI future could actually sound more exciting than today's all-you-can-listen-to streaming buffet.
If generative music is deployed very carefully and safely, you still create an environment where people want to create. You incentivize, it's like you want to be a really unique producer so that you have a unique sound that it's worth training a model off of that is like recognizable. I feel like a lot of times the algorithms, like the streaming algorithms, really encourage music to sound the same. This is something that I think would really encourage music to sound more different. And I think that is like a net good.
So far, so good. But Grimes is not a utopian. She's also aware of the risks. I asked her what her red lines are, what the downsides are to this.
I think, especially with the deepfakes, like people should have consent. I think that's super important, super essential. Like even though I'm doing this with my voice, I think there is potentially an argument that deepfakes should be illegal across the board. I don't actually see a long-term utility for deepfakes. Like I see a lot of potential for political distress and like political unrest and harming especially women. Is it worth the emotional downsides? I don't know. That's part of why I'm doing this, is running the experiment.
Grimes has a point. It's tremendously powerful to imagine artists, rather than tech platforms or record labels, leading the charge of AI clones for their own benefit. But the issue of control is still there. What if malicious actors, hackers, fraudsters use Grimes' voice to sing about hate crimes or to ruin her image? What if her own work becomes devalued as a result? What if a lot of bad content gets uploaded? If there's one big challenge hanging over a platform like ElfTech, it's probably long-term sustainability. It takes resources and bandwidth to police a platform. So while it makes sense that models would be run at the individual artist level, it should be done with a pragmatic, not idealistic approach. This is all moving very fast, and Grimes says we need to slow down and think of all sorts of ways to minimize AI harms and maximize benefits.
I think a lot of people think it's just going to be great. If we just make these things, they're just going to be great and we're fine. And a lot of people think this is definitely a dystopia and we're definitely fucked. And I think it can truly be a third thing. It just is going to require a lot of working together and stuff that we have not always displayed. We haven't always been great at that, but I really, truly think there's no reason why we couldn't be better at that now.
What's your vision of the future? How are we consuming music, and where is your voice? Is it everywhere? What's your vision?
For me personally, I love that. I always use these two examples, but I think League of Legends and Harry Potter have done a very good job of not punishing fan art. They don't seem to issue takedowns. Like they let people sell prints of like League of Legends characters and stuff. There's just like an insanely prolific amount of Harry Potter fan art, and it makes the community richer and super engaged. And Grimes is like pretty different from how I am. And I see Grimes as, it's more of a character. It's a science fiction project. It's just all these things. And I don't feel bad about not having ownership of that. I would like it to not do harmful things, but it's like you look at something like Disney, it's like a lot of the best Disney stuff was made after Walt Disney was dead.
So maybe there is that third way between utopia and dystopia after all. And maybe there is a chance at a more punk rock, independent approach than what the big companies are offering. But we still need to talk about some of the real existential risks that are being posed by AI. And also why Rick Astley could be the key to one of the most burning issues out there: copyright.
Did you say Rick Astley?
Yes, Tim. I'm never going to give you up, never going to let you down, and actually that's the closest we're ever going to get to a Rickroll.
Okay, I'm excited to hear more, as I've been throughout this episode, but let's take another quick break and then pick this back up on the other side.
Sure.
Okay, we're back with Bloomberg Opinion columnist Lionel Laurent, and we're reaching the end of our journey into the world of AI and music. What's next, Lionel?
So we've talked a lot about the big tectonic shifts around AI music, but we haven't really talked about the existential threat at the heart of this story. There are 213,738 identified singers and musicians out there, according to the 2016 US Census. And that is, of course, only talking about the States. They won't all be able to keep up with the deep-pocketed AI industry that's attracting money and talent. And even if we keep telling ourselves we'll always value human connections, the fact is these musicians are already under pressure from streaming. The top 1% of artists on Spotify earn 90% of the royalties, meaning that for everybody else, live music has become essential as a way to make a musical living. But even that is getting tough, as top concert tours from superstars like Taylor Swift get bigger, pricier, and more dominant.
Singer and songwriter Taylor Swift has a new reputation for boosting the U.S. economy. It's estimated that her tour could generate over $4.5 billion in consumer spending.
More musicians are quitting the industry, unable to make a living, and it's become normal to see Grammy nominees working as realtors. Sam Grimley is one musician who spent years performing with artists including Tom Jones and Ed Sheeran, but who since has left the industry.
Being a touring musician is the best job in the world for someone who's 25 years old. But once you get to a certain stage in life, the sort of glamour starts to fade and you start to want slightly different things in life. So I wanted a slightly more stable existence. When I launched my music career, it was around the time that Napster was turning the music industry upside down. And over the next 15 years, roughly, the overall revenue from recorded music absolutely plummeted. So, in a sense, I was lucky that I had gone into the live music industry, but then another way of looking at that is it became increasingly the only option for musicians to make a viable living.
So if there is an existential threat out there, it's that the combined forces of streaming and AI will break music's long-running passion principle. This is the force that keeps new musicians coming up and dreaming that they just might have a shot at making it big, even if so many of them don't. If AI music is so successful that it smothers platforms like Spotify and disincentivizes new music completely, that would be a disaster.
I do think AI could replace some aspects of what musicians currently do. It seems entirely plausible that in the very near future we could end up with AI session musicians who are able to replicate the feel or the sound of various famous musicians. And that really does represent a serious threat to people for whom session performance is their livelihood.
The poetic twist is that Sam is now a lawyer, and he talked to us about copyright, an issue that seems, let's face it, a little dull, but it's actually absolutely critical to the AI story. Copyright protects the ability to profit from art, and it also incentivizes the creation of new works. Maybe we need to strengthen it, or adapt it, to AI-proof future generations.
Those AI systems are trained on human creations, so there's a question mark over whether those creators would or could be adequately credited, compensated, or able to control the output of those systems.
For example, imagine an AI trained on the Rolling Stones that outputs a piece that sounds like, but isn't actually, Satisfaction. Might the Rolling Stones have a case for compensation? Maybe we need new rights to those musical stems that go into an AI, or an artist's general feel or groove. And that is where Rick Astley comes in.
There's a very interesting case being brought in California by Rick Astley, and he's essentially claiming that imitation of his voice is an infringement of his rights. An AI system is trained to sound like or trained to have the feel of, I don't know, Ringo Starr. Could Ringo Starr demand a royalty fee or demand a license fee or prevent the usage of that track?
To be clear, the Rick Astley case refers to a human imitating his voice, not AI. And Astley also settled out of court. But the fundamental legal principle remains the same. Record labels are actually pushing for a new federal right of publicity law that would protect artists against the unauthorized use of their likeness or identity. Another way to AI-proof copyright is by considering the possibility of some kind of junior credit to the machine itself. This has been explicitly ruled out by the recent Screenwriters Union deal in Hollywood, but in music, things aren't settled yet. Crispin Hunt, who we heard from earlier in the show, thinks this might help us also reevaluate the role of bots and AI, and perhaps allow us to pay their human counterparts more.
I believe we need to give AI some form of formalized, not quite copyright, but maybe a neighboring right, so that it has a value. Otherwise, it will be completely free, and that will completely undermine the possibility of humans making a living from music.
Some of that is getting closer. The website Boomy says that music produced using its platform belongs to Boomy, and albums produced by Endel carry its name on the songwriting credits. If that were also accompanied by better transparency on what is AI and what is human music, we could be at the start of a more positive debate about better rewarding authentic human creativity.
I think it would be fairly straightforward for the streaming services to have a button that you could flick where you listen to only 60% created human music, or you can set a level. If the robot music has some kind of neighbouring right or copyright, then I don't think the streaming services can charge as much. I think they can charge 20 quid a month for organic human-made music and 3 quid a month if you're going to be listening to robots.
Crispin's idea could be getting closer to reality. Universal Music's partnership with Deezer proposes to pay human artists more above a certain threshold. But more needs to be done. This could be a good moment to consider a whole new payment model for streaming, such as the user-centric model, which would take everybody's individual subscription fees and pay them out according to what they actually listen to themselves on Spotify. The current system puts all of the fees into one pot and distributes them according to market share. So I think ultimately, even as there is so much to grapple with when it comes to AI, there's one big positive. It just might force us to put a new value on what's authentically human. And that might just be the third way between utopia and dystopia that keeps artists stepping up to the plate.
Okay, Lionel, I have to jump in again. As you know, Crash Course is all about learning something new, and we don't let anybody get off the show without telling us what they've learned. So what were your key takeaways?
So I guess one takeaway is that AI is already here. So the debate needs to shift to how to use it safely, and also how to change the industry's economics to put human artists first. I think what isn't clear is the actual level of demand that exists for AI music. I mean, Napster made everyone feel like a kid in a candy store. This feels a little more niche, like VR or even the metaverse. I think, though, it's clear that tech is taking over more and more of music and culture, and that is going to be what ultimately holds lessons for the rest of the economy.
All right, Lionel, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Here at Crash Course, we believe that collisions can be messy, impressive, challenging, surprising, and always instructive. In today's Crash Course, I learned that while AI is turning the music industry on its head, as it is so many other industries, there's also some very smart and creative people trying to figure out how to navigate around some of those problems. What did you learn? We'd love to hear from you. You can tweet at the Bloomberg Opinion handle, @opinion, or me, @Tim O'Brien, using the hashtag Bloomberg Crash Course. You can also subscribe to our show wherever you're listening right now, and please leave us a review. It helps more people find the show. This episode was produced by Moses Andam, Lionel Laurent, and Anna Mazarakis. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen, and we had editing help from Sage Bauman, Jeff Grocott, Mike Nitza, and Christine Vanden Beilard. Blake Maples does our sound engineering, and our original theme song was composed by Luis Guerra. I'm Tim O'Brien. We'll be back next week with another Crash Course.